So what does a typical day in the life look like of a live streaming videographer? I wish that I could say I wake up at sunrise without an alarm, pop my morning supplements, and go out for a morning run. Come back home to blend up a delicious green smoothie and... Okay, let's be real. It doesn't always work out that way, and I wish I were better at having some sort of routine, but I think the beauty of what I do is that it changes every single day. So if I had to break down a typical day, it's important to mention that I usually have two kinds of days. The first is an office day, or what I like to call an admin day. For an admin day, I'll typically get up around 7 a.m. and head to the gym, if I wasn't working too late on a gig the night before. I'll spend about 45 minutes to an hour in the gym, and I'll be back home by 8:30 to shower, change, and pack up to head to the office. Usually I've meal prepped and can grab a quick meal from the fridge to take to the office, and I'm in the office a little bit before 10 a.m. I'll typically start off by going to my notes app on my phone, where I have two very important notes. The first is a note that shows my projects in progress. It's here that I'll keep track of all of the client projects on my plate, and I'll assign them a priority level of 1, meaning urgent, 2, meaning within a week, or 3, meaning within a month that it has to be done. This way I can quickly figure out which project needs to be taken care of first. This note also tracks things like the point of contact name, project name, scope of work, and current status. I'll use the current status to remind myself what I did last and what needs to happen next, so I don't mix up my projects and I don't lose track of something that I knew I needed to do. Lastly, each note will include a project deadline, pricing details in the event that I haven't created the deposit invoice or contract yet, and deliverable information. I try to keep this up to date so I don't need to use any additional headspace to constantly remember little pieces to each project. The other note that I'll check is my to-do list. This has 4 sections: today, tomorrow, this week, and this month. This lets me keep track of everything from my reminders to drop a suit off at the dry cleaners to work action items like buying more gaff tape. If there's anything urgent between these two notes, I'll spend the first hour of the morning in the office taking care of them, and I'll make some mental notes if there's anything I could run out and do later that day, such as drop the dry cleaning off when I go to ship out a hard drive at FedEx, or return that piece of gear that I rented from a colleague when I need to hop on a longer client call. Around 11 a.m., there's usually a good chunk of emails to get through and some phone calls to be made, which leads me to my noon lunchtime break. I'll usually watch some YouTube tutorials while I eat lunch at the office, or I'll simply run out and grab something to eat if I didn't bring food with me. The afternoon is usually filled with a mix of editing videos, answering more emails, taking more client calls, and working with my intern since I take on 1 intern per semester from a university nearby. Okay, so 3 p.m. rolls around, and this is where the afternoon slump tends to settle in. And if I don't have an afternoon gig, I'll usually leave the office early and head home for the day. On later days, I'm rarely out later than 4 or 5. This is where I have time to go home and relax, work on my other projects, take care of chores, see friends for dinner, or sometimes just be a couch potato and play some Call of Duty. Nuketown, in case you were wondering, is a great stress reliever after taking client calls all day. Around 6, I'll grab my laptop and work from the couch for another hour or two, whether it's working on my YouTube channel, sending out proposals and contracts, or simply learning more about a new piece of software or gear. I try to invest a little time into work after my afternoon slump to make up for the lost time. Now, for a typical day when I do have a gig, which, to be quite frank, there's never really a typical. Some events are all-day gigs and some events are not, so they each have different needs. Let's go with a full-day event down in DC. This typical day starts off the night before, where I'll spend an hour at the studio organizing equipment, pulling cables, charging up batteries, and getting the car loaded up so I don't have to do it in the morning. If I have to be in DC for a morning setup, I'll usually get up around 5 a.m. and be out of the house no later than 5:30. The DC rush hour tends to start around 6 when leaving Baltimore, so that has me stuck on the road from about 5:30 to 7. If I make good time, I'll get to a parking garage or the venue's loading dock to get my gear in. It's here that I'll meet the rest of my crew and we'll get everything into the building. For some venues, there might be security to check in with, or we may have to go to a service elevator to get our gear into the building. Once we see the room, I'll have a little powwow with my team, go over the layout and where cameras will be placed, talk about cable runs, and I'll give them an idea of what the show will look like for the day. If we have some extra setup time, I'll put a coffee order in from my phone and have a production assistant run out to get coffee and some breakfast for the team. Setup is typically planned for 2 to 3 hours depending on event start time. So if our event kicks off at 9:30, we'll use the 2 hours from when we arrive to get everything into place. I'll usually begin with my tech table while my camera operator will build out cameras and tripods. We'll meet in the middle with running cable and taping everything down for safety. As soon as my tech table is up and my computers are connected to the internet, I'll run speed tests and start loading in any graphics. I'll customize my multi-viewer and start labeling my inputs and outputs. If I'm bringing my audio tech with me, we'll do a sound check about 30 minutes out from showtime to make sure that everything is kosher, and at this point, we'll test any screens or projectors that we might need to be sending our feeds to. Once the event starts at 9:30, we're off to the races. A typical full-day show may end around 5, with the team perfecting the 1-hour loadout. If it's a bigger event, we'll usually build in 2 to 3 hours for loadout, but on average, an hour is all we need to break everything down and be out the door. As my team breaks down gear, I'll start backing up any recordings from my HyperDecks or any memory cards where we recorded internally on the cameras. If I'm using an ISO ATEM, then everything will be on the hard drive, but if the internet is fast enough, I'll at least upload program feed to Google Drive so that in the event that something happened to me while driving home or a drive was lost, I'll have my backup. With the car loaded up at 6 p.m., it's going to be a solid 2-hour commute back to the studio as DC traffic is relentless. If I'm lucky, I might get back by 7:30, but not without a stop at Chick-fil-A for dinner and a celebratory milkshake. By the time I eat dinner, unload equipment, and lock up the office, it's usually 8:30 and I'll be home by 9, just in time to knock out an episode of the latest Netflix series that I'm binging and to answer any client emails that I missed or to schedule Zoom meetings for the next day. As you can see, a typical day in the life requires hard work on live stream days, and I'll give it my all for that 17-hour time block between my 5 a.m. wake-up call and 10 p.m. cutoff for the day. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to have half-day events, so it's not as hectic, and other times I have an easier going day in the office. That's the trade-off of making my own schedule. I gain back the time and flexibility on off days, and I choose which days will be a hectic 17-hour workday. When it comes to this industry, I can't say there's a typical. I can say that it's rewarding. So, how does your day stack up? Let me know in the comments down below.